What happens when you've checked all the boxes successful career, high impact roles, impressive achievements, but still feel misaligned? For Raychel Hollingsworth, that question became the catalyst for radical transformation. In this deeply personal episode, Raychel, former Google and Meta leader turned trauma informed life coach and cosmic life designer, shares her extraordinary journey from surviving childhood trauma to helping high achievers break free from internal cages and redefine what success truly means. Let's welcome her to the show. Welcome to Sunday Soul Day, Raychel.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here.
I'm so excited to have you on and to dive into your background and let our audience get to know you a little bit.
Me too. I've been listening to some of your podcasts and I am just like blown away by your ability to hold space. And even in our conversation just now, I'm like, okay, you're in your element.
No, this has been such a gift for me, to be honest with you. Like, I didn't realize how natural it would be for me. But then I think about my journey as a recruiter, where I talk to so many people from around the globe and have helped hire so many people, and a large part of that is not just hiring them to do the job, but to also get to know the whole person in a short window to be able to make sure that you're not just hiring a cultural fit, but a cultural addition for the organization. So I feel like that, you know, those guiding principles and lessons that I've learned throughout my years of, being a people leader has really helped the show so much.
It's so beautiful when we have an opportunity to look back at all of these invisible threads and how they come together and we get to see like the story that we didn't think made any sense is actually helping us to see ourselves and our path with more clarity.
Exactly. So beautifully articulated because it's so true.
And you've been helping people to step into the position that they want for such a long time, whether it's the life that they want or even, a job in a company. So it's also really cool to see that too, that parallel.
Thank you for pointing that out. I appreciate that because I've been telling people I feel like I've been doing my purpose for a long time, but just in different ways. And our purpose is never one thing, but it's every life we touch, Dr. Maya Angelou, not my words, but her beautiful words. And it's so true if you think about that, and I've been operating in my purpose, but just differently. So now it's on a completely different scale in a different way, which is what, my creator, who I call God, called me to do. So thank you for pointing that out. Well, I'd love for the audience to get to know you a little bit because I love your background and your journey. Before you became a trauma-informed life coach, and also a happiness expert, which is so cool. Tell us a little bit about your journey. Like, take us back to the early years. Like, what kind of shaped you and what did you survive, kind of and get to a place of thriving? Like, what did that journey look like for you?
Yeah, it has not been an easy journey to get to this place. I feel like for most of us healers, we have to really walk through the hot coals in a big way and continue to unravel and just let ourselves like find ourselves, like peel away all that conditioning. So yeah, for me, I grew up in a household of a lot of trauma and chaos. The police were regularly involved. There was threats of foster care from a really young age. And, my parents had divorced when I was super young and just clawed at each other in a big way. So, at this point, I hold no resentment toward, I think everybody's really just doing the best that they can with what they have and navigating their own traumas in real time. But I do think that at the time I was just really experiencing a lot of their pain that was really passed down onto me. And so for many years, as you're going through life and you're developing your view of the world and you're mapping and you're developing your core beliefs before you're at the age of 7, there was just so much that I had internalized about who I needed to be in order to reduce the tension in a very, very tense, chaotic environment. And so that led to perfectionism and people pleasing and self doubt and feeling like I needed to do in order to be worthy. And so I luckily for I think a lot of my path like really leaned into trying to make the world a better place and trying to do in order to make the world a better place. So, now that I've unraveled, I no longer resort back to a lot of those behavior patterns, but the heart and the soul of who I am was really showing through even in those early years. So I ultimately moved out when I was 15 years old. I became self-supporting, hustled my way through, got a full ride scholarship to UC Berkeley, and really like just kept just trying to climb and get so far away from my past. And every room that I walked into at that time, it just felt so different. Like I was like, I don't belong. I come from a low income background. I know nothing about the business world. I was surrounded by people who were wearing suits and talking about internships and talking about the interest rates. And I'm just like reading constantly, being like, I need to, oh, there's so much to learn, right? There's so much to learn. And I really felt out of my element, but I was like, everything is a business and I just need to know how to do this. And I really wanted to insert myself into rooms to advocate for people who couldn't be there to advocate for themselves. And that was so deep and deeply embedded in my DNA. Like, just seeing what I was raised in and how there was so much unfairness and how there really wasn't a big voice for these lower income populations or for people of diverse backgrounds and even for me, like walking into that business school and being surrounded by a lot of people who didn't have the same background as me, I was just aware of how different I felt and how needed it was for me to be different, which is a scary thing, right? You're entering into a new world. So from
Especially at
there,
such a young age. I mean, we're so young.
and really just like navigating the world for the first time by myself. I didn't have parents telling me what to do or advising me. There was just a lot of like more questions than answers, I would say, especially at that stage. And so I struggled a lot with imposter syndrome, but I just kept going. So my first job out of college, I worked in forensics, and so I solved white collar crime and did fraud investigations and tried to help rebalance the massive economic divide to put more money in people's hands that deserved it after dealing with bribery or dealing with like massive disparities or challenges like the BP oil spill. I worked directly on that. And then at some point I shifted into technology and I started working in machine learning and algorithmic fairness, because as we're building machine learning models for these massive tech companies, and you have a lot of people who think the same, who look the same with the same backgrounds, it's oftentimes the diverse populations that are not advocated for. And so I really had an opportunity to inform these algorithms in a big way by starting to consult with child development experts and people of a wide variety of backgrounds, and thinking about things like user safety and protections to make sure that as we're asking questions of our algorithms, we're really being thoughtful about how we're guiding them with our language. And so that, I think, the tech world really opened up a lot of doors for me. I was able to start leading teams and really championing and being a massive voice for a large population that will maybe never know me. And then moved into Google at some point where I was working on Google search during a pandemic. And working on the most on fire things to try to bring equitable health information to billions of people across the world. Kind of just realized like I've been chasing this version of success and I did not feel happy. And I knew that there was a lot that I had been doing that was really with other people in mind, but I had never learned to consider myself. And so that was when I started to start asking different questions. And I started to be like, what does it look like to not just be externally kind, but also be internally kind? What does it look like to slow my own narrative down and to like really tend to me? And so that was when I started to really lean into my coaching and leading more into a trauma-informed space. And now I get to work with people across the world to help them heal their traumas and be who they want to be and to find what happiness looks like for them.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Thank you so much, first of all, for taking us through your journey. I mean, oh my gosh, there's so much there that we can touch on. It's like, I love that first are so vulnerable and sharing, your earlier trauma. And I think it's so important to note, like a large part of, our purpose is in our pain, and the things that we go through or, live through and then learn to thrive through at some point, once we do the work. And so I love that you shared that. And I can see through your journey, you know, how you navigated that and then to now step into your purpose. Like, what did that feel like, leaving at like 15 or, just I'm still blown away at that because I think back to when I was 15, 16, I'm like, what was I doing? How could I navigate the world. And it's like, not only were you navigating the world in trying to unlearn what you just lived through, right, up to age 15, but then you're also trying to relearn and then position yourself to grow, and learn, right? And so what did that feel like, because you became like financially independent at 15.
It's so fascinating because we have these survival mechanisms that really help us to focus on certain things at certain times. And at the time, I wasn't focused on my trauma. I was just focused on staying afloat. And
Yes.
so these like, I'm so grateful for the ways that humans adapt to be able to do that, because I think my survival and where I am now is a true testament to that. And it really wasn't until, many years ago now where I started to really deeply unravel some of the traumas that were happening in my 15 to 18, 20-year-old state. I think one of the benefits, and I use that term lightly, but one of the benefits that I do want to call out to the childhood that I had was also that I was in the court system, and the court system, at least at the time, did court mandated therapy. And so even from 4 years old onward, I was learning how to convey my emotions. And I was starting to find safety in my own voice and in connecting with myself. And, that was something that, like, I think my healing journey has been multiple decades now, even though, just because of that path, and because of the fact that as I was going through things, I was still starting to create my own vocabulary about my emotions that I think it takes people a long time to really start to reconnect with. So I tell you all of this because, like, I think 15-year-old Raychel was very aware of how much hurt there was. And truthfully, it was one of those situations where I knew who I could be in the environment that I was in. And I had no idea what the other side looked like. But I was like, that can't be worse than this. It can't be worse than the ways that I'm making myself small. I was struggling with disordered eating. I was struggling with just like feeling so depressed and so sad, and just really wanting to shrink myself in every way, shape, and form. And I was just like, I don't know what's over there, but I need to get out there to know if I can make something of myself, and what happens when you put me in a new environment.
There is something in you, and it's like you have this fighter spirit, even though you're saying you wanted to shrink and do all these things, like I see it, just in listening to you. Like that fighter spirit is what really carries us, like even when we're just trying to figure it out. And I tell people, like, sometimes the answers aren't in front of you, most times they aren't. But if you're doing, which is what you were doing, you were just like moving forward. You kept moving forward, like you didn't lay down. You might have stopped and paused, but you didn't lay down. And I think that's like such a huge takeaway from listening to your journey, is that you kept going, kept
Yeah.
fighting, kept learning, kept growing, So love that. Oh my gosh. And
It's back now, I see so much of my behavior pattern was a trauma response.
yeah,
And so I
exactly.
am a very driven person, and I am very ambitious. And I do have this like massive heart that when I was young, I was afraid of, because when
Mhm.
you're a big feeler, you're not convenient to other people, like the world is a very overstimulating place for a big feeler. And it really wasn't until truthfully, the last few years that I am honoring my sensitivity as the superpower that it really is, and using my intuition even with clients, and not only focusing on the data and the research and the logic based and just thinking so up here, but also being aware of all of these invisible in between moments, the connection and the authenticity and the rawness and the realness of our human experience, the frequencies, vibrations, all of it. And where I'm honoring that with just as much sacredness as I honor the things that in our Western society we say we know.
So good. And I think too, it's so challenging for people to even articulate their feelings. And so the fact that you got that therapy, the system is broken in a lot of ways, but they did do some right in a lot of ways too, right? And so I love that you called that out. But, I think, being able to articulate your feelings when it hasn't been modeled to you and you haven't seen those imprints, it's not always easy. And so the fact that even you are talking about, the difficulty in that journey and then finally getting to a place of honoring. I think it's really an important call out for the audience, because if you're in a space where you're not fully honoring yourself yet, that's okay. Like you can grow into that and, continue to learn and continue to expand, your ability to do that. And it does take time, and honestly practice. I mean, I was very hard on myself. My self-talk was terrible in my earlier years, and then I got to a place where I realized, like, wait a minute, like God created me. The same God that created the stars, the moons, the oceans, the rivers, all the beautiful things that I admire, he also created me. So why am I ripping myself to shreds, and not honoring, like, not just parts of me, which I was good at honoring parts of me, but not my full self. And so I love that you called that out. Like, your healing journey spans 2 decades now that we've, been talking, like with the blend of like Western therapy, somatic work, shamanic plant medicine. Like, what was the turning point that kind of moved you from simply healing, like, to feeling deeper and like really going deep into your healing?
Oh, interesting question. I feel like hmm, going deep into my healing. I feel like I've been going deep for as long as I can remember.
Mm,
I think you probably get the sense from me already, but like I'm not a surface level kind of person. I want to understand the ins and outs and I want to have that deeper connection. And I really want to be able to talk about the meaning of all of it and to make sense of all of it and to see the art and the poetry. And so I think for me, the more that I would forcefully tear myself open, being like, look, I can heal, the more I was like, oh, there's something to be said about what I'm doing here, about how I think every lesson needs to come with like so much pain and how there's actually healing in the joy and the happiness. Because so many of us, we think about healing and we're like, oh, I don't know, that looks really scary. But I think that what we forget is that when we get to see these new parts of ourselves and these like hidden pockets of our being, we get to fall in love with parts of ourselves that never received that sort of appreciation or compassion. And there's so much power in that. And so I think when I started to embrace knowing myself more deeply, not as something to fear, but as something to love, as something that was so beautifully worthy, and that every step along my process had intention, that I was supposed to, it's like, I know you mentioned people listening right now and being like, oh, I don't know if I have the vocabulary yet. Like, if you're listening to this, you are where you are supposed to be
yes.
100% in this moment, listening to this. And however this changes you, even if it's a 1% shift, that 1% shift over time, that's what the world needs. That is what changes us for the better. Because when we think about change, we usually think about these big dramatic, like I need to drop everything, and that's not sustainable. It's jarring for our system. It's really these like subtle shifts, these subtle practices that we take to just love ourselves a little bit more, to challenge our existing programming, to understand and uncover, like, why do I think this way? Is this still serving me? Is this like from the map that I drew when I was 4 years old and I'm still following it without questioning it? The Crayola scrapped together treasure map that I put together to avoid my pain? Or is it really something that like my current logical self and my current heart and grounded self is like, this is aligned with who I want to be?
I love that you mentioned that, like just those incremental changes, because it all compounds over time, and I think the most important thing that I kind of take to my clients, like when I'm working with clients, is like, let's look at those micro and macro shifts, because both matter equally, and it's to me, I would even argue that the micro shifts over time consistently, compounding, over the course of whatever time period, are even more important than some of those macro, because it's really in those consistent changes that you really start to bloom, like if you think about a garden. I use the garden analogy a lot, in my content and everything that I do, but it's like a garden blooms over time, and it never blooms all year round, it's pauses, and so same with us, like, so I love that you called that out. And I think, like, we're always trying to get to this better version of ourselves, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. like I'm that person too, but I also think it's important to get to like your favorite self,
Mhm.
and your joyful self as well, and sometimes that is just honoring where you are right now.
Yes, yes. I mean, like the constant act of chasing when
Yes.
you exist to be, like the things that we do, they are important. They can be meaningful, yes, but to chase hoping that you achieving a certain accolade or a certain action is missing the point of what it is to be alive. Because life is not just like a collection of your highlight reel. It's in all of the in-between moments that people don't see, and how you treat yourself, your most important relationship of all time, the person you spend 100% of your waking minutes with. And it's like you go to bed with yourself every night, like, don't you want that to be your best friend? But so many of us were like, well, hold on, once I achieve this next
Achieve this.
milestone,
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
I'll be the me I can't wait to be around. And then you achieve the milestone, and then it's like, well, once the next one and it's like, I think we're practicing behavior patterns all the time, and we're putting it under this label of ambition. And this is not to say ambition is bad, but I think that there's a difference between a trauma response, which tells you something like you're broken, like, let's make sure people don't find out, and ambition, which is like, you've got this, like, I love you, let's keep loving the world in this way, let's keep being mindful of the seeds that we plant, and growing our garden, so to speak.
Yes.
But
No,
unfortunately,
it's so true. It's so true. And I think it's honestly the difference, and I talk about this a lot on the show. Shout out to Marianne Williamson, who wrote a whole book about this, Turn to Love. But it's really the difference in living in fear and living in love. And I think a large part of us live so fear-based, like, and we operate in such a fear-based way. Like, and, that constant chasing, that workhorse in us, and then we have this general in us that's like yelling at us, we're not doing enough, we're not, getting to the next accolade fast enough. And, it's so important. Like, yes, the accolade is great, but it's even more important to enjoy the journey to the accolade. And I think a large part of us, because we live so fear-based, we can't even enjoy it, and so when we arrive at the destination, we're freaking exhausted, and then we're already looking at the next one. And I'm like very ambitious, in that way. Like I have a lot of goals, but I'm like, the most important thing to me is I'm like, I don't get attached to the outcome. I am so deeply connected to the route too, and the journey, and how I feel about the journey, and how I talk about myself on the journey, how I celebrate my failures because I, make mistakes all the time. And I'm like, I want to get to a place where once I get to wherever destination that is, wherever God carries me, like I want to make sure I enjoy it, and that I'm celebrating. And so I love that you kind of mentioned that, but I really do think it's a difference between living in fear and love.
I completely agree. I completely agree. And I love what you just said. Like, it's interesting in that, because even when we think about living in love,
Mhm.
so many of us learned love from our first caretakers, who learned love from their caretakers. And unfortunately, we learned a kind of love that actually was seeded with fear and control, and just a lot of things that actually weren't love. And we were like, this is what love is, I'm going to keep giving that out freely to everyone else. And I feel like part of this healing journey is really reconnecting and loving yourself in such an unapologetically compassionate way, for all of the flaws, for all of the the things that you thought you'd be afraid to see about yourself, and just being like, gosh, look at how brightly I shine when I'm not limiting who I show up in the world as. For me, I was like very structured. I had like a 10-year plan. I worked backward every minute. I was like, got 60 seconds to do the like to do
Yeah.
85 things. And that's still, it shows up for me. It's still, I'm no one's perfect. And even as I do my reflection, I'm like, I love that I'm efficient. I love that I care about that. For every part of your personality, we have a shadow. Everything that you love about yourself, there is some sort of dark element that maybe you can't see quite clearly, but is kind of like the equal and opposite, that can also hold true. And I think just being responsible humans, and leaning into who we truly want to be, we owe it to ourselves and the people that we love to just keep ourselves in check. and just keep evaluating with compassion, with love, not with over scrutiny. Like, let ourselves be human. That's what we are. We're a living, breathing plant, you know.
Exactly. And I think it's so important to like honor both the shadow and the light, and I think like a lot of times when people don't honor who they are, they're busy trying to hide the shadow, because they don't want people to see the shadow. Because then it's like, then they'll find me out, And I think when, I like, even for myself, like I think back to like the years, when, I wanted to hide my shadow side in my 20s, when I fully started embracing my shadow, like, late 20s, early 30s, like, but also like the light and understanding that the two can live together and I can also call in more light. I understood like my power, and so I think like that is such an important call out. And, something else that you continue to talk about is like happiness, and I think like when you're living in that way, you're not happy. You can't even embrace happiness fully because you're too busy being someone else, or afraid of being who you are in fear of judgment, in fear of whatever it is, externally outside of yourself. Like you describe yourself as a happiness expert, which I love. Like in a world that often treats happiness as a destination or a performance, like what does real embodied happiness mean to you?
Oh, I love this question. It means loving yourself for everything that you do all the time. It doesn't mean smiling constantly. It doesn't mean that you don't have sad days. It means that every human experience is just that. It's an experience. It's a part of your journey. And to have the perspective of, gosh, I'm in a hard situation, but I came here to be in a hard situation. So what is it that I'm supposed to be learning right now? And really stepping back into the driver's seat of your own life, where if something doesn't feel good repeatedly, you figure out, okay, what am I learning right now, and how am I going to take this and continue to step into more of myself through this path. Because I truly see life as this continuous creative unfolding that we get to write every single day. And it's like, it's like we're watching our favorite movie and we're watching our hero on screen, and we're like, okay, the hard part isn't the end of this story. So how do I want the story to finish? How do I want this chapter to have meaning? And I think really just being embodied in that, not just bypassing the lessons, not acting like things are fine when they aren't, but just being present, truly present with yourself, not treating happiness as a destination, but rather than chasing all these things you want, stepping into it. It looks different for everyone. I know I'm speaking kind of abstract terms right now.
No,
And
but it's so true though. And I think like it's, again, we're talking so much about this, but it's like the difference between living in fear and love. And I think when you're living more in a love space, you have a lot more compassion for yourself,
yes,
and so you're able to love yourself, like not all the parts we love, right? But you get to a place of compassion for the parts, and you're able to embrace it, and say like for me, like I'm a workhorse. I love working, like, and it's not like I used to work from a trauma, place, but now I work from a more aligned, like intentional, joyful place. Still work the same, but just the outcome is so different, and
yeah,
the energy is so different. And so, like, it took for me to understand like, okay, I had to love like all of my whole self, you know, and the parts that I'm still working on, and there are parts, we all have parts we're still working on, and parts
yeah.
that I'm like, but that's okay. I'm like, look how far you've gotten, like it's amazing. So I love that you talk about that. Like you also kind of help people anchor, wisdom from a spiritual component. Like, talk to me a little bit about that. Like, what do people often kind of get wrong about their spiritual growth? And like, how do you help them embody that?
Mm. So, I think one of the things that I've always enjoyed about my place in this universe has been really being a bridge from one side to the other, because I really believe in unity and coexistence. And I really believe that if you could follow someone's journey all the way through, you would understand why they do what they do. You might not agree with it or how things manifest for them, but I think that there would be a level of understanding. And so one of the things that has actually followed me throughout my career and still continues to this day has been being able to bring very differently minded people together over a common goal. So I use that in my career in tech, where I'm talking to everyone between like legal experts, policymakers, engineers, product folks, like folks across the board who really think and view the world in a different way, and really corralled them and helped them to see something that the other side was trying to present in a way that just wasn't translating. And so I say all of this because when it comes to spirituality, I also see that there's this beautiful needed overlap between the spiritual and the structured, and that the coexistence between the two, not being overly structured to the point where you eliminate universal intervention and divine timing, and like the ability for the universe to work its magic, like and whether you refer to it as God, the universe, like we have all these different terms that ultimately in my heart and in my being really emphasize a similar concept, which is that we are not like alone. When I work with my clients, I really try to honor exactly where they are. So I have clients of various religious backgrounds who believe in very different things, or have, other ways of viewing the world, other ways of viewing religion or spirituality, or just a connection with themselves. And it's really important to me that my clients feel like they can be everything that they want to be, because I am not their compass. I am not the person telling them, no, 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 hold on, here are the guidelines. Have you read them? Like you have to believe this in order for me to work with you. That's absolutely not who I've chosen to be, and the type of work that I choose to do. Like, there are all of these invisible elements that are hard to put to words, and that really operate in this space between. And when we start believing and we start seeing the magic in humanity and in just universal existence, there is like a natural spirituality that emerges.
Absolutely. And so beautifully articulated. And I think, spirituality is all encompassing, and I think having some form, whatever your form is, spiritual practice is so important to continue to grow, because we live so much in our heads, and so much in our thoughts, in our experiences. But when you realize that you're absolutely not alone, and that there's a larger force, power, whatever words you want to use, mine is God. Like I know I'm not alone, and also that I don't have to carry everything. And I think that's when I started to release a lot of the pressure that we constantly feel, like we're spiraling in our heads because we feel like we're the only ones who can solve it. We're not giving it anywhere. So it stays within us. And so, like, I do this thing every night that's called a release. And I release the things that I've carried throughout the day that don't matter. And then I surrender the things to God that I just know I don't have to carry alone. And I sleep like a baby because of it, And I understand, like, I'm literally not alone. No matter where I go, like, I'm always covered by Him, And so, this is to anyone out there, whatever your spiritual practice is, whether it's through meditation, mindfulness, journaling, like whatever your practice is, even just spending time within yourself, like, and just sitting with yourself, like understanding that you're not alone, and I think like a large part of us when we're especially going through things, you know, we feel so alone. So why this show is so powerful and so many other podcasts, because when you start to listen in and you realize, oh wow, like, oh, there's going to be guests that see themselves in you, and they're going to be like, wow, like I have a similar experience, I'm actually not alone. Like it's so powerful. Like, so I think like a spiritual practice is so important, but also too like a community practice. Whatever your community is, it could be like one or two people or massive, But like, I think it's so important to realize, like, and I love that you called that out as like we're not doing life alone. Like I mean, you see it even in nature. It's like so much of the in between, that we don't even realize is happening, but it's so beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. I really, really loved what you said. And I think that there's so much power in not shouldering
Yeah.
everything, every challenge that you come into contact with or that you see on the news, or this is not to say that we don't step into an empowered place. This is to say that especially for high performers who learned that they receive love by acting and doing, it is very easy to continue through life and just continue to stack responsibilities on your shoulders as though everybody else's problems, same. Oh,
Guilty.
same.
Yeah. Like completely guilty. Yeah.
But look at like the
Good.
fact that you are so embodied and your nightly practice that you just said, like there's so much power in deciding, okay, here's what I'm going to take on,
Yep.
but I also I don't need to hold on to this anymore. It's not because like, it's almost like you throw it in the trunk of your car and then you just keep driving. You throw it in the trunk of your car and you keep driving. And at some point your trunk is sagging on the floor and you're getting horrible mileage because
Yeah.
it's like,
Facts. And you're slowing down.
and we do that to our bodies.
Yep.
We do
Every
that
day.
to our bodies. We stack on pressure and we act like, well, no, I can handle it. Meanwhile, your body is experiencing chronic inflammation and autoimmune issues. And, then other random issue pops up out of nowhere, other aches or pains. And we as a culture, we at times become so dissociative and we numb so much and we put band-aids on things and we act like it's not there. But like even when our minds don't pay attention or even when our minds don't remember, our nervous system does. And you can't outrun you. Your body has been with you through 100% of your experiences, and your nervous system is feeling into those environments. So, I mean, like really giving yourself the opportunity to release what is not yours to carry and give yourself the rest, the time, the focus that you deserve on what your path truly is. Like, I mean, that's such an empowering place to be, because otherwise you have a list of 100,000 things that and all these directions, and you can't actually make meaningful progress in any of them.
Well, and also you find yourself carrying other people's stuff too.
Mm.
You start piling on, and that's what I used to do is like I think about generationally, even like all the things that I carried, didn't even realize I was carrying, but the body keeps the score, to that beautiful book. It's like our nervous systems, our bodies, they remember everything, whether it's trauma in the womb, like, trauma that you see with your eyes, that you experience with your body, like your mind, like it remembers all of that. And so it's so important to get into a practice where you are releasing some of that, whatever that practice is, but finding what works for you. I'm really big on, so I love that you touched on that with your clients. It's like you create a space for them to understand that all the answers are already inside of them, as opposed to giving them your answers and what works for you. And, I think some of the best coaches do that. Like, they create space for their clients to understand what they need, in order to kind of evolve. And I love that you mentioned the bridge. I use that as well. It's like, or even like driving a car is what I like to use. Like one of the analogies I use, I'm like, you're the driver. Like I'm in the passenger seat. I might hold your map, and be like, oh, like, okay, that's one route we can take. And here's an alternative route, but like you're ultimately navigating the destination, you're navigating like what you need along the way when you want to stop. If you want to stop and get some coffee, like you're the driver. So I love that you mentioned that with your clients.
It can be so hard for people because we've given so much of our power away over time.
Yes.
And when we're so used to figuring out who we are based off of the context of a room, like we enter a room and we're like, who should I be here? Who should I be here? And we just adjust and we're chameleons like that. And it's really hard for us to see who we are.
So many times people are led by fear. And so like they're constantly projecting onto you. And so like if you think about it, I mean, really all of our relationships are mirrors. And so like, but it's so important to get around people who have cleaned their mirror off, their inner mirror off. So then you can see yourself. Otherwise, you're seeing the muck of their inner mirror. And so that's what you're looking at. And that's not a clear definition, excuse me, of who you are. And I think that's really important to understand. Like I think about relationships. There's people that are like 10 gallon full of love. And I thought like, okay, I don't necessarily need that love in return because God gave me so much love in me to give. And so I was a giver. I just gave. But then I realized like how much I was depleted by the time I was like, what, like 32, 30, in my early 30s. Like I was so depleted. And I realized like when I wanted to turn back to the people who I was born into, like they weren't there, you know? And and I know a lot of us go through that, like, and it's not, I'm not upset or anything. Like I understand, like I learned so much in that process too about myself and how I was neglecting me, and I also taught people how to treat me because I taught them that it's okay to put me second or third or not even on your list for some cases, like don't worry, like I have enough love for both of us. It's like, no, that's not an equally yoked relationship. Like it's so important to be around people who are also doing the work, like whether they're a partner, like in a business or a partner in your life, family even. Sometimes you can't always be around family because they're not in a space to reflect back to you.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And I think so many people can relate. I think what I found in my own journey, and you may be able to relate to this as well, is that the more that we love ourselves the way that we need to be loved, the more that we raise our bar for what we're willing to accept,
Facts.
and the more that we no longer entertain people who don't know
No.
how to give us the kind of love we're giving ourselves. Because look, like I think for such a long time I held out on loving myself because I was like, well, I'm not complete. I am imperfect. I'm all these things.
Yep.
And it hit me one day and I was like, how am I going to know that my love feels good if I'm not willing to try it on?
Exactly.
Like, I don't know. I don't know that it feels good to be loved by me because I've never even given myself that chance. And as soon as I started loving me, I mean, I've been in many relationships, some abusive relationships, as I was really learning the ropes of how to be in a functional relationship. There's so much you internalize in romantic relationships and mirrors. I mean, as we're talking about mirrors, like your romantic partner really holds up that mirror to you
Oh
in your
yeah.
body in a big way. But like even over the course of my marriage, like I've evolved so much.
Mhm.
And there were things that really weren't working for me early in my marriage. And when I stopped trying to just be who I thought I needed to be to perfectly fit in the puzzle that we had created together, and I gave myself permission to just like break the mold. And I was like, you know what? This isn't working for me. I'm going to stop prioritizing you and the way that I'm supposed to show up for you before I prioritize me. And I let myself transform and evolve and disappoint him. And
Mhm.
then I started to realize, gosh, I am never going to disappoint myself again. I am never going to disappoint my inner child who needs me, who has needed me my whole life. And I finally get to be that hero for her. And as soon as I did that, my relationship started to evolve. Because like the thing is that when you change and you change the mold of a perfectly fitting relationship, you force the other person to respond to you differently. And it doesn't mean that they know how to show up for the new version of you. They may like, some people who are less evolved and less willing to do their own work might undercut you or use their own fear as a
100%.
projection.
Hmm.
But also like when you love yourself enough, you start to realize, oh, that's not for me. Like,
And you also realize it has nothing to do with you and everything to do with how they see and feel about themselves. And that was a huge growth for me, is like I understood like my, evolving and growing and learning and unlearning so many patterns, like where I am today, like it repels what's not for me naturally. Like, so I don't even have to do much work in that sense, because I think like people understand now, like, oh, okay, she's, her boundaries are there. Like, they're not even going to try it. And if they do, they learn very quickly that I'm just not going to tolerate that anymore, like because I've set a standard within myself and I hold myself to the same standard for others. And
yeah,
that's the important, part as well. Is not just I don't have these just for me. It's like this is how I hold standards for others as well, Like I honor where you're at. Like I'm not judging you. Like you're, if you want to stay exactly where you are, there's no judgment. Like there's nothing but love, Like, but I need to keep going and keep growing in a way that, I've been called to.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Oh my gosh.
There's so much power and conviction, and
It
just like
is.
your energy is so full of love, and it's so astounding how embodied you are as well, because I can really feel the I can feel the pain that created this journey, and that shaped you, and that helped you to be exactly who you are right now. No, whoever's listening right now, like, like, we don't know what pain we're silently dealing with. Like, everybody puts on a good face, and what you see on social media is not the whole story. And it feels really lonely when you feel like you are the only one who suffers. There's so much beauty and energy and connection here in this conversation, that it's just a reminder, like, we are all human beings and we all struggle. And it's the things we weren't trained to talk about that oftentimes are the things we need to talk about.
Mhm. Oh my gosh, I love that you said that. And it's why I created the show, because I'm like, I want to hold space for people to share, parts that maybe they don't fully share on social media, or like maybe they do and others are not ready yet. But now that they've seen, this particular guest or sharing, they're like, wow, like I'm getting a little bit more confidence, and like, let me share that part, because I think like we hold on to so much, we don't realize that that has power over us, like, and it's because we're allowing it, and until we share it, and not just sharing it in a way that, from a painful place, but an empowered place. Like I own every part of my journey. I'm like, there's no one that can point out any flaws to me or anything back or throw anything in my face that I haven't fully embraced. I'm like, if someone says something to me, I'm like, and,
I love that. I love that
like,
so
do you know what I mean? Like,
love
there's
it.
nothing. Like, I love every part of an inch of me, like all of it. So good luck, like, and people have tried, like they've tried to throw things at me, like really hoping to, I believe, like get a rise out of me because they were so triggered.
Right.
And I'm like, unfortunately, you just don't hold power to do that, like I
Yeah.
don't give anyone my power. So
It's so fascinating because as humans, we are so afraid of what we are capable of, that we
yes.
down, and we're so afraid of our dreams and not making them, that we just double down on this plan B, and we act like it's everything we wanted. And then we're so dissatisfied, and we take it
Yeah.
out on everybody else. And it's like, just give you a big old hug and let you cry it out. And you know what I mean? Like, gosh,
No, but it's so good. Oh my gosh, we could do a whole episode on that, because I'm so serious. Like you think about, even in, let's just start with relationships, right? It's like, how many times do we hear like men, just settling for who's around, like women do it too, like we're so afraid of going for what we really want in a partner, like in fear of, or in that, job. Maybe it's like a role that you're trying to do, or like get to the next level, or become a manager or director or an executive, like, or maybe it is chasing your dreams, like whatever that is, like to live your life in such a full way. I think we do it to ourselves, like, and we're living this fractional version of ourselves so often, and I'm like, a part of my coaching is helping people remember those puzzle pieces, finding them. And it's not that you're broken, but you've buried them. You've literally buried them because maybe someone told you you couldn't, or maybe you start telling yourself you couldn't, you start believing it, maybe you started just getting comfortable with your plan B, to your point, like, and I think so many times we operate like that. Like, even for me, I got to a point where I was like, content. And I always want to be content with where I am, but I want to always continue to grow. So I'm like, I think we are constantly living in this or world. And it's so important to live in the and. You can be content and you can continue to grow. And
Mhm.
so, oh my gosh, we need to do a show on that.
I love it. I love it. I'm like, hold on, maybe we need to have 5 more
I
conversations.
know, seriously. Well, tell me, like, how do you take care of yourself? You're taking care of your clients, you're showing up online. Like, how do you fuel your mind, your body, and your soul?
Ooh, taking care of me, I've changed my relationship with taking care of me so much over the years, because it used to be something I would rush through, and now it's something that I feel like is an honor. I get to help my body run more smoothly. So what does that mean? And for me, that means regular meditation. I have little ceremonies that I do before and after clients to really cleanse my energy and ground myself and connect back to being a conduit for good. Because I am not here to tell my clients what to do. I'm here to help them connect with themselves and to be that mirror that they need and to hold the safest, most sacred container, someplace that they know that they can always come to just completely unravel, and that whoever they want to be in that moment, there's space for that. And they get to try that on and they get to practice it in our sessions before the rest of the world gets to see that version of themselves. And so, in order to do that, I have to continue to be embodied and I have to continue to entertain the ands, like what you just said. I love what you just said, because you're so right. There's so much nuance to how we need to live our lives and how we need to like love ourselves. It's not overly self-indulgent. It's also like, how do I find the balance? How do I make sure I'm not going too far in one direction? And so there's a lot of journaling in my practice, always movement. I have a very rapidly thinking mind, ADHD, there's lots of fun things going on there. Lots of juicy neurodivergence happening. And so for me, I know that, that energy, if left in my body, will create a lot of anxiety. But if I can move through it, if I can do yoga or weight lift or cardio or just getting outside, putting my feet in the grass, I can allow that energy to escape my system. I do this with my clients as well, especially, working in the trauma space. There's so much trauma that gets stored in the nervous system and the body. So even things as simple as like shaking can be a really beautiful way to release emotional energy that gets stored in the body. And so I'm very mindful about that. And I'm also mindful about what I ingest. And when I think about the things that I ingest, I'm not just talking like diet, although that's super important, drinking enough water, like making good decisions to prioritize your body to the best of your capability. I know that that's a whole other topic in itself in terms of accessibility and everything like that. So I want to be thoughtful about that. But just making decisions that really honor what you feel like you need for yourself. But also, what are you ingesting on social media? How often are your news articles popping up? And is it really truly beneficial for you to have that update every 5 seconds? Like, what sort of accounts do you follow? What conversations are you having? Are they really filling your soul, or are they just perpetuating a version of you that you think you need to be accepted? So like I think as a part of like just my like creating the optimal environment for my own growth, just being aware of where I'm planted and not just continuing to subject myself to that environment because it's what I've done before, but assessing regularly and being like, does this still feel good? And then being willing to make a change if not.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing. I love asking this question to everyone because people are at different stages in their life and also like need different things. And so it's always great for the audience, myself included, to hear what others are doing, get inspired to maybe try something different, because what worked for you, last year or even a month ago might not work for you today. And so I think, again, like, not just living in the or, but the and like trying different things and embracing this newer version, like as you continue to evolve, because I will tell you, like my practice has changed from what I did last year to this year, and I love that for me, and I think you touch on something that's so important, and so many of us mothers are so guilty of it, and not to shame anyone, like I'm myself included, is like you're rushing through like the evening, bath time and all these things. And we're modeling all of that to our kids. This includes also their morning practice, and like I hear so many, I have friends, like moms that are like, oh my gosh, like we're rushing out the door. And, it's like that's the energy that they're starting their day with, so you have the power to choose, so maybe it means getting up a little earlier, like 15, 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes earlier, just to give everybody time, to start their day off like a little slower, a little bit more intentional, So I love that you touched on that.
I think that there's something beautiful about really knowing yourself well enough to figure
Yeah.
out what components of life are important and then making space for those things.
Are you taking on new clients? Like what's next for you?
Oh yeah. So Right now, I actually do have one space available to work with other people. So if there's anybody listening who's interested in working through and healing and, really pushing to that next level, seeing who they truly are, and whether it's in a business context or personal context, spiritual, all of the above. I work with everybody from small businesses and helping them scale to working with individuals and helping them to figure out how do they help themselves unprogram who they've become and get closer to who they've always been. So I do have one open slot for clients right now. My primary focus actually has been more speaking engagements and working with bigger audiences. So my next upcoming speaking engagement is actually at the end of July, where I get to chat with 450 people and bring them through a transformative experience of connecting with the self and being more mindful about these small in-between moments, like our inner critic and our inner advocate and our inner child. You see a lot of that in my content where I personify the different parts to really just showcase how they show up in our lives in a way that's tangible. But those are big focuses for me. And I'm also working on a book. My partner and I are moving to Peru for a period of time to do some
Oh
volunteer
my
work, and
goodness.
it's a lot of stuff in the works right now. But yeah.
Cool. That's awesome. Well, you have to let me know when you're off and where you're going so I can follow. So,
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, I'll be posting more about my journey as things
oh,
start to.
good. Yay. Okay, awesome. Well, anyone that, is looking for a speaker, please reach out directly to Raychel. She's wonderful, as you've seen on the show. And everyone, as always, have an amazing Sunday. And do us a favor, leave us your favorite part about this interview in the comments below, or maybe something that you learned that surprised you.
Hmm.
Bye.
Wow.